Hey, friend, welcome to another episode of the Sunday Sitdown. And we hope that this episode finds you having a good winter week. Felt like winter disappeared for a few days and we got a whole lot of rain and everything flooded and then it all froze. And here we are with a parking lot full of ice. So that was a fun morning.
Yeah.
We hope that you're having a good start to your new year. I don't know about you, Justin, or you who's listening, but my wife and I were talking this week. Like, it's just felt like 2026 has started off by like a little bit punch you in the teeth kind of way. And it's I don't know exactly why that is. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in the world, and it seems like everybody's sick, and
the weather sucks.
Yeah.
And it's like all the things combined. I can feel that. I can feel that. Yeah.
But Happy New Year for whatever that is worth at this point. I think this is too far along. I don't think you can say Happy New Year on the 12th of January anymore.
You know what? We got a month. We got January. That's only 1 in 12 for like the year, you know?
I did call 2026 a newborn baby that's still wet behind the ears in the sermon. Like if 2026 was a baby, it would still be wet behind it, like just fresh out. So it is the start of the new year.
Yeah. So, and you started off, we've started back into Luke in our Sunday, for our Sunday worship. You kind of talked a little bit about like, you can do the calculations. We're halfway through. We started off back into Luke with like an exceptionally like challenging passage. It's like there are passages, like I think the last time we were in Luke, which was I think when I was preaching from the beginning of Luke 12 and the end of Luke 11, it was like theologically challenging in some ways, in a lot of ways. This one, pretty clear in many ways. Like there's some, I think, nuance of understanding, but man, like I think just challenge. This was challenging in a very different way, convicting. I know for a lot of people, I know that like my wife and I last night were out on a walk and like talking through things, and it's like it's just challenging to do the thing because it's about money and our possessions and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is exactly, I think, just a name. It's exactly what I hope happens after a challenging sermon, right? Yeah. So when like it's good that things are challenging. It's good that they're difficult. It's good that it's hard to walk out, and it's good that you're feeling it because it means that you're really actually wrestling with it. Like if I got up there and I preached on a passage exactly like this, difficult not to understand, but difficult to actually live out. And then people are like, well, that's easy. That was a simple thing, simple message. Like I would have felt like I failed. So I think it's good. Like it's good to feel it because honestly, I think that means you're taking it seriously. So to anybody out there who's also feeling it, be like walking away from that sermon, or, you can go back and reread Luke 12 and we're talking about not being anxious for the things that you need, not even the things that you want, but like food and clothing and shelter, like the actual real needs of life. And Jesus says, don't be anxious about it. Like your Heavenly Father knows that you need them and He wants to give you these things. So don't chase after them, chase after the kingdom, and let me worry about the rest of it. But it's like you said, it's maybe easy to understand the thing. It's a lot harder to actually live it out. Yeah. And that's what I was trying to press into when you kind of unpack this parable of the landowner who's really successful and then who makes a whole lot of money, quote, like I'm using air quotes here, like money, but he has a lot of material possessions in the day, mostly food, right? And so what does he do? He thinks to himself, I'm going to knock down the barns that I have and I'm going to build bigger barns and I'm going to store away more. I've been really successful. And I think the danger of a parable like that is that you like characterize this individual and you make him out to be a villain. You make him out to be, you start to make assumptions. He must have been profiting by being unethical. He must be an evil person. He must be one who is harsh toward his workers. He must be one who's profiting on the backs of others. He must be profiting to the degree that others are losing and suffering. And Jesus offers none of that in the parable.
No.
The hard part is that he just seems like a reasonable guy.
And we could make lots of assumptions that Jesus doesn't give us. But I think, if you go with just, Occam's razor, the most logical solution here is that, he was just someone who's like, I've got too much stuff. I need more stuff for my stuff.
Yeah.
And like that tracks in our world. I feel like that is, not an uncommon thing. I need, to do a renovation at my house so that I can fit more whatever, right?
Yeah. So I don't have a tablet or a phone with me here, but can you look something up? So
Absolutely.
there is a stat that floats around on how much storage there is. And I don't know I can't remember if it's in the States or if it's in North America, but like how much storage space there is per like human being. And it's kind of wild how we've created an entire industry to store away things that we don't have space for in our house, where we also store away things, wherever that is, right? Whether it's our house, whether it's an apartment or whatever place we're choosing to live at whatever given time.
And in my mind, like those like storage facilities, those are meant for like when I'm moving.
Right.
That's the only time
Right.
I've ever used one. I was moving. We had like a 2-month like period where we had stuff in a storage thing.
Yep.
But sometimes people they have just permanent residence, not like they're not living in them, but like their stuff is permanentally residing there.
Yeah.
And that's where you get like those cheesy shows where they
You sell off
they sell all the stuff because like they're in arrears and anyway.
You might not be able to find it. You might be able to find it.
I'll take a look. But,
it is kind of wild to me how much industry is built around even storing up of things that we don't need, that we've maybe even forgotten that we have.
I'm getting an AI overview that basically says, and so I take this with a grain of salt, but it might be relatively true, is that it's around 6.3 square feet in the US per person of storage. And that's like far and away larger than any other part of the world. Because you even go to like the UK. They don't value space in the same way that North Americans tend to. Like the thought of having I have a finished basement, the thought of like having a hangout area or potentially even like a living area, like where someone would sleep in a basement, is like often a foreign concept.
Even grass, right? Like the idea of the lot distribution is different.
Yeah.
So 6 square feet.
More than 6 square feet per person.
Yeah. So that's like take a step and then turn and take a half step in the 90-degree angle, and that's kind of like roughly the amount per person. Per individual. Which is wild to me. So that's just a random fact for your your morning listen on the Sunday sit down. That there's a fact that you can put away and never need to know again.
So one of the as we've said, like this whole passage is, I think, fairly easy to understand the implication, but much harder to do, because I think we can automatically go to the questions of like the extreme. It's like, well, I don't have what that billionaire has. Like, I'm not hoarding wealth like them. I'm not doing this. Or for different like lower income brackets, it's like, well, I will never attain any level of that, that type of greed or whatever, because it's just not possible for me. But I think one thing that you sort of cut to was like, whether you are very well off in your life and you've had a successful career, or whether you have very little, the heart is really where we need to look in terms of understanding what is going on for us. Because you've seen contentment with people who have very little and exceeding generosity with those who have very much, right? and some of those conversations are complex. But so I think we end up like asking ourselves like a lot of questions that are like particulars, like the question that we were asking, that I know that I was asking when we were like doing sermon prep last week was, okay, so like, are my retirement savings, is that sin? You know, and like, that's where we want to go right away.
Yeah.
And it's like Jesus, I feel like Jesus would be asking the same questions. I'm like, look, I'm not your accountant. Like,
Yeah. I don't, yeah.
So like I'm more like interested in what's going on in here, you know? And yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a lot there. Just to comment on the first thing that you said, I think one of our natural human inclinations is to do that. Like, well, what about this person, or what about that person? What about the billionaire who has, like, I don't have that much, or we go immediately to comparison.
Yes.
Where there's just this, this tendency to say, well, I'm not as bad as, so therefore I must be good. Like, I must be okay
for justification purposes.
Yeah. And you go, well, I'm not as bad as that person. I'm not as bad as that family, or, you know, that couple, and how they spend money is far worse, or nobody should be allowed to have $1 billion. And it just, all it does is it avoids accountability in your own life, because you get to feel good that you're not as bad as somebody else. Right. So I think as soon as, you know, if that's the inclination in your heart, is to go say, well, at least I'm not as bad as, like, that already, should be pointing you towards something going on inside of you. Or to say, well, you know, there are billionaires that exist out there. We should, like, billionaires shouldn't be allowed to exist. Sure, fair, make that argument, but that, you know, that's no reason for you to be any different with your own time and money and resources.
Right.
You know, their existence shouldn't, it doesn't give you justification to do whatever you want, which I think sometimes we want to. Like, we want to say, well, you know, there's enough food to feed everybody. It's just a distribution issue, so I'm not going to do anything about it. Right. Or, you know, there's enough money for everybody in the world to be, you know, to live some level of lifestyle. So, you know, why should I be the one to give anything away? It should be the people with more. And I go, yeah, okay, true, it should be. And it should also be you. Like, it's tough to, I think, do you start to make that argument? Whenever you start to make that argument, I know, you know, it's often from a place of, I don't really want to do what I'm feeling convicted to do. So I'm going to make other people worse than I am, so that I can be okay with where I'm at.
And it's like, we need to have two different conversations. There is a conversation to be had about, like, hey, let's talk about the ethics of like, you know, say food inequity, and say, like, well, you know, like, around the world there is enough to go around, and like there are barriers and systemic issues, and like, let's talk about the ethics of all of these things, and geopolitics, and like, that's a very different conversation. It's very interesting to have. It's great to talk about, you know, it's great to talk about the ethics of billionaires, but it's removed from, again, it avoids talking about our hearts and what's going on for me personally. And that if I am, you know, if I make X amount of dollars and am willing to be just completely unaccountable for any of it, that's a me problem, not a global food shortage.
Distribution problem.
Yeah. Like,
absolutely. And so, like, I named this on Sunday, but I feel like it's helpful to name again. Jesus actually presses on that point, right? Where, you know, so this younger brother, and we're assuming that, but, you know, I think commentators and theologians would agree that's a fairly safe assumption. The older brother is probably not going to be the one coming to Jesus to say, like, make my younger brother share the divide the inheritance equally or differently. Like, that's just not a scenario that would happen. So younger brother comes to Jesus. Jesus doesn't say, yeah, you know what? You're right. Your older brother shouldn't have that much money. He should share it. I mean, equivalent to saying, yeah, you know what? Those billionaires shouldn't exist. They should share it. Jesus doesn't do that.
Yeah.
What he says is, you're both being driven by covetousness. You're both being driven by greed and envy. So greed for the things that you want and don't have and think you are maybe even owed or due, but you know, again, don't have. Envy to look at what somebody else has and to say, you know, in an unhealthy way, I want that to the degree that you're saying, you know, I deserve what you have, right? So I think it's helpful just to flesh those things out. But Jesus doesn't play either game, right? It doesn't say to this younger brother, yeah, you know what, you're right. You should be given a little bit more and things should be fair, quote, right? Or he doesn't say, yeah, you know what, the older brother should give you more than what you have. He also doesn't say, you know, tough luck. Yeah. You know, this is what the law says, so just do the thing. He cuts, like you said, he cuts to the heart of the issue, which is both of their greeds. And that's like brilliant quote. And I brought Fred Craddock's commentary where he says, like, who can decide, you know, who can decide whose greed is better or worse, right? Like, that's the line. Yeah. So he's got this great take on Jesus. He's like, Jesus is asked to be a referee and he refuses. After all, who can judge whose greed is right? And so, you know, I think we sit here and we go, yeah, okay, should there be a conversation around, food distribution, the wealth that exists in the world, how we've made a mess of it? Yes, definitely at some point, in some way, absolutely. But that's not what Jesus is saying here. He calls both of it greed, whether you have much or have little. We're all capable of greed and of envy and covetousness to kind of sum all of that up in a way of being. So I think then the question becomes, and I think you're going to take us there, the question becomes, okay, so what? Yeah. What do you do with it?
Yeah. And so, the question that I think we should all be asking is simply, what is enough? What is enough? And I think that there's a lot of different directions you could go in that. I have sort of like I'm not going to ask this yet because it's sort of like a follow-up from the question of what is enough. But just like, what's the first thing that comes to mind when I ask that question?
So, okay, I want to tell two stories. Number one, I heard a pastor in the States named Brian Loritz preach a sermon on this topic of enough and what is enough. And you know, my wife and I walked away from that, hearing that, and it was at the Global Leadership Summit one year. We walked away from that really wrestling out for ourselves, okay, what will be enough? And so he tells this story where he planted a church, and early on he, was making peanuts, and then the church started to grow, and the board, in their constitution and their makeup, the board got together and said, okay, we're going to give him a raise. And so they gave him a raise, and he accepted that raise, and then the church continued to grow, and so a few years later he got another raise, and a few years later the same thing. So trajectory over a chunk of career was that his income was increasing as the church was growing and as his responsibility was increasing, and et cetera. So all that was happening. And he tells this story of having to sit down with his wife and decide, like, is it right for us to take this? A, is it right for us to take this raise? B, like, what are we going to do? Like, are we just going to commit ourselves to this endless pursuit of increase? Right? Like, are we content just allowing this to happen and allowing ourselves to raise our lifestyle with the income, household income increase, or are we going to choose and commit to be different about how we use it? And so what they decided was that they're going to take the increase, like they're going to use the increase, or accept it, I think would be the word he used. But they are going to decide as a family what is enough. And anything that they make as a household, she's like, she was working, he was working, anything that they make as a household over that enough, they're going to give away. So some of it they're going to tithe back to the church, some of it they're going to give to mission organizations and partners, and they're just going to then with the rest be generous with it. But for them, it was a conscious decision of saying, okay, this is what enough it looks like for us as a family, and we're going to choose to not accidentally increase enough, because I think that's what happened. So I walked away really convicted about that. And this was like a decade ago almost now, that probably honestly around the same time that if you're in the sermon on Sunday, around the same time that we started doing these crazy experiments, like eating all the food in our house until until buying anything else, because we were convicted as a couple. Okay, how are we going to be? And figuring out like to decide and determine and discern what is enough is a really hard thing to do. So what we decided was we've got to figure out what enough is, and enough should probably like feel a little bit uncomfortable. Like it shouldn't feel like cushy. It shouldn't feel safe. It shouldn't feel like we can do everything we want and buy everything we want and not have to ask any questions and not have any hard conversations, and we can go on whatever vacation we want to go on. Like that, I think, would be many people's definition of enough. And so what Brian Luritz and that story really revealed to us was, okay, you've got to fight the urge to just allow your lifestyle to increase with your household income. Because it's like, what's the science experiment? I don't think this is a science experiment. This would be a terrible science experiment. But like boiling frogs never like jump out of a pot. Like if you put them in when the water's cold and then you put the pot on and they boil, like they will stay in the pot and die because they don't register the temperature, like the slow temperature rise. That's a horrible science experiment. Please, nobody do that science experiment. But if you were to like toss a frog into boiling water, apparently they jump out because they know this is going to kill me. And I think that our tolerance for enough or for it changes slowly as we age. For many people. And I would say that like the caveat here is, obviously always there are exceptions to these kind of general analogies and statements, but typically as a household, let's say, your income's going to increase over, from your, let's say, early 20s to 50s, right? The assumption is your income is going to increase. And
as you further your career, as you like, I think I'm thinking about like the common trajectory for a lot of people, not everyone, but like that is usually you start in your career and you build and build and build. And by the time you're at 50s, you're at your pinnacle.
Right.
Yeah.
So what happens with that trajectory is that your lifestyle changes. You start to buy more things, you start to live in a bigger house, you move houses, you buy nicer things, you go out to eat more, maybe go on a vacation, maybe go on another vacation. Like your lifestyle increases often at the rate of your career trajectory. Now, what also happens is your lifestyle increases too fast. Right?
Yeah.
But what can equally happen, what is equally a possibility, is to say, we're not going to allow our lifestyle to increase at that rate. We're not going to allow ourselves to become boiling frogs. Like we're going to actually choose to step out of that and be different toward our money and toward our generosity with others, with the church, with what God is doing in the world. And that takes a conscious choice. So I walked away from that leadership summit thinking to myself, hey, okay, what do we need to do in order to determine and then commit to enough? And we're still trying to figure it out. Yeah. So you start to have kids and like your bills increase. And anyways, like it's but it needs to be this constant conversation of what will be enough. Now, on the flip side of it, I brought Craddock in because I want to read another line that we were batting around in the sermon prep, I think after the sermon. So we were having this conversation, sermon prep, and Allison was here texting afterward. And I sent this quote to you and to Allison. And let me find it, because I think that this is actually harder for us to grasp than just simply saying, determine for yourself what is enough. And then give everything else away. That would be a fantastic start. If everybody did that,
it'd be so easy.
But it's too easy. That's the thing. Because if I get to determine what is enough, then here. Okay.
While you're looking it up, like man, like what a gift Craddock's commentary has been. Like he's just like such a sharp mind, and
and like preacher, right? So I think that's why I really appreciate it, because he's got these lines. He's like, the preacher should be careful to not do this. I'm like, thank you, Fred. Okay, good deal. I won't do that. So he says this. So he's talking about anxiety. And I think this is going to be a helpful chunk, because one of the questions that I think one could have walking away from a sermon like that and from a passage like this is, okay, well, is all anxiety just anxiety about material possessions, wealth, money, and things? Like, what about general anxiety disorders? What about like clinically diagnosed anxiety? What about the stuff that that creeps in? Like, is it all like, it just says, don't be anxious. Like, can I just turn it off like a faucet? Like, what's going on? So this is helpful. He says, the second theme in the unit on possessions concerns anxiety. And then he says the injunction against anxiety is not a general one. It's not against all anxieties. And if I don't regret, I try not to have regrets after preaching, because like I believe that the preaching moment is what it is because the Holy Spirit allows it to be. So I'm like, I'm not going to regret something. But I think if I were to preach this again in a different way, this would be a line that I would have included.
Right.
That it's not an injunction. Jesus isn't speaking against all kinds of anxiety, general anxiety, all as a whole. He's speaking against a very specific anxiety. And then Craddock goes on to say, because sometimes actually anxiety is positive in the New Testament. So Paul's got this positive regard and care for the church. So you see that in 2 Corinthians. Timothy has it, right? Timothy's anxiety for the welfare of the Philippians. Like the same word is used positively to be like this positive concern and worry about a people that you care deeply for, right? And your desire for them to experience life and fullness of life, and to not live into sin patterns and habits that are destroying them. And so there's actually a positive anxiety in the New Testament. So that's number one. And then number two, I think it's not just this general. Jesus is not saying this will cure all of your anxiety about everything all the time.
And it's not a physiological kind of anxiety, because like anxiety is generally just a response, to stimuli that we don't like, or that is, sometimes it can be positive, sometimes negative.
Yeah.
And so telling someone with like generalized anxiety, don't be anxious, is like, it's when you tell, when you tell someone, just like, don't worry about it. Like, don't just don't stress about it. It's like, well, I can't help it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think if you're out there wrestling with anxiety, it's you need to figure out the root cause. And that's going to happen, I think, with pastors. I think it's going to happen with therapists and with friends, like deep, meaningful friendships, people who know you and who have known you for a long time, and know you in a very meaningful and significant way. Like, there are lots of routes to uncovering like the root causes of anxiety, for sure. Yeah. I think for a lot of people, root cause of anxiety is actually what Jesus is talking about, though, which is safety and security. That's a core longing that human beings have. Now, you might have issue with safety and security because you didn't receive it as a child, which is a whole lot different of a conversation to have than if you have safety and security issues that are, primarily related around money and things. Like the money and things is actually just, I think, an outpouring of the like craving after safety and security. The root cause of your safety and security stuff, that's what you got to uncover. And so at any rate, I think safe to say, anxiety can actually be positive in the New Testament, and Jesus isn't speaking against all anxiety for all time. He's speaking against a very specific anxiety. So Craddock goes on, and he says this: here the issue is preoccupation with material things. And then he says, everyone, of course, protests that he or she only wants enough. But here's what I want people to hear. But no one knows how much is enough until one has too much. So I texted that to you and to Allison. Yeah. And I think one of the responses that came back was literally like, so is there ever an, quote, enough? Or as soon as you have enough, do you really have too much? To which I responded, I want it to be the former. I want it to be that, no, there really is an enough that you can discover and figure out, which tells me it's the latter.
Yeah.
That really, like what I want for there to be an, quote, enough that I can attain and feel comfortably.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which tells me that as soon as you have too much, it really actually, or as soon as you have, quote, enough, it really is too much. So it's like, it's a luxury to be able to say, I have enough.
Yeah. So if you're asking the question, that might be a sign in and of itself.
I think if you can answer the question, yes, I have enough, that is the answer.
Right.
That maybe so here's what I have come to about this, because I think it's actually just semantics. I think it entirely comes down to who we allow to define our enough. So if I get to be the one who defines what is enough for me, then right away, too much, right? Probably too much. I'm going to err on the side of too much. And I know that to be true. And I think people, if you like really sit with your own thoughts and wants, people realize like, yeah, I fall into that category. Like if I get to be the one to determine what is enough for me, I'm always going to err on the side of too much. Now I know that there are exceptions to this, right? And I know that there are people who's like, well, what about Mother Teresa, or what about these people who have given up what looks like an entirely worldly material possession kind of lifestyle. Yes, like there are always going to be outliers and exceptions, but I think
probably not you though.
No, it's not me. Okay, I'm not the exception. I am not the exception, right? So if I get to be the one to define enough, then I think I'm already going to start from a selfish standpoint. I think that's just the nature of humanity and the nature of sin and depravity. Like I think we tip in that direction. So do I want to do better? Yes, absolutely, right? Do I want to shame people for also being a little bit selfish? No, absolutely not. Like I think we all want to be better and do better. And we're not horrible, terrible people for having this selfish bent. We're human. So the question in my mind becomes, who is defining what is enough? And this is where our conversation over preaching prep went, I think, in a pretty cool direction. And I'm curious to flesh this out in longer conversations. But what would it look like? And I would just say this, and we pulled this idea from John Mark Comer's book, Practicing the Way. So he talks about how a group of families have gotten together, and if any one of the families is going to make a purchase over a certain amount of money, like over a certain dollar amount, they've got to they've got to actually submit it to the families, the other families.
Which some people in our case, so like I loved where our discussion went with that, and by the end I was like, that's really cool. That seems very countercultural in the right way of like, hey, we're not gonna feed the machine. We're gonna actually be in dialogue, in community, in conversation with our decisions. Yeah. But man, there is such my initial reaction, and I think for probably a lot of people, it's going to be like, that feels so intrusive.
Yeah. It's my private life. And this whole idea though, and this is not the time for this conversation, this whole idea of like a public and private life has gotten us into a tremendous amount of trouble.
So much,
right, like the privatization or like the individualization, even of the household, like I'll say that. So like I think we live in this rampant age of individualism, and we're hurting because of it, and that we see that in individual, like in literally like the single person, but we also see it in terms of family and households. Then it becomes an individual family unit, like an individual, like so a couple who's married or a couple who's married with kids, like you still become a singular unit of whatever that unit is. If you're a solo person, you are a singular unit of solo personhood of people, right? If you are a married couple, you are a singular unit of married couples. If you are a family with kids, like you are a singular unit of family with kids. So we view this like ethics and morality through the lens naturally right now of individualism, which is, I think, incredibly harmful in the long run. So again, that all I'm going to say on that right now. Connie and I have this baby version of it, which now feels entirely way too safe. So we have like, and it has a stupid name, but it's like a marital allowance,
right?
And so a friend of ours in seminary, his mom and dad, together with another couple, wrote this like marriage prep book, and so it's this great two-parter like series. So there's a book that's designed for the husband, and then there's a book that's designed for the wife, and they work cooperatively, these two couples, on these books. And so it's called The Most Important Year in a Man's Life, and then The Most Important Year in a Woman's Life. And it's the engagement year leading up to the marriage, and then the first year of marriage is kind of the timeline. But they suggested it in that book, and so that's one of the books that Connie and I worked through when we were engaged. The idea is, and it's not rocket science, there's a fixed amount of money that I can spend without asking Connie. And there's a fixed amount of money that Connie can spend without asking me. And it gives freedom. Like it's one of those, it's a beautiful example of how guardrails and boundaries produce good freedom. So I know that if a purchase is under a certain amount, I can make it. it might be a dumb purchase at the end of the day,
Yeah.
but it's not going to breach that, like, how are we managing money together as a couple? Like, I can't go out and spend $700 on something. That's not the benchmark. Like, it's a lot lower than that. You know, there were times in our lives when it was like $20, and then there was a time when it was $50, and then there's a time when it's $100, and there's a time when it's $200, and you can see even in that the creep of the frog in the boiling pot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's you know, I think it's that level of commitment. So that's between spouses to say, hey, we're not going to do this. Like, in order to manage money together well, we're going to commit these things to each other. It's that, but on steroids, where like households, families, like if anything's going to cost them over. And I think for John Mark Comer, I think what he talks about is $1,000. So I'm like, shoot, 5 years ago, you couldn't buy like a big TV without talking to somebody about it. But here's the beauty of it is, like, it allows, just to pull it all the way back to the beginning, it allows for somebody else to input on your own definition of enough. So if you and I, like if Connie and I and you and Lindsay were to do this, and you can bleep out your wife's name if you want to bleep it out in the podcast. Because
My wife's name is Lindsay.
Right. Yeah. So fair. So if the four of us were to commit to do this, let's say, it allows and it what it limits is it limits Connie and I from defining what is enough for us. And they do it like for you know, for like income, salary, givings, like what would it look like for the two of us to commit our budget, like in 2026, to say, okay, Justin and Lindsay, here's our household budget. Here's how much we're going to spend on groceries, like the percentage. Here's how much we're going to spend on travel, the percentage. Here's how much we're going to spend on entertainment, the percentage. Here's what we're spending on like cell phone and internet and things like. Anyways, here are all our percentages. Like,
how does this look to you?
Pray about this.
Yeah.
Like, is this reasonable?
Yeah.
Is this acceptable? Are we living inside our means or outside our means? Are we, like, have we properly defined what enough actually is for us? Like, have we allotted enough for our kids and their expenses? Have we allotted enough for food? Have we allotted enough for housing? And have we allotted too much in areas that are unnecessary? So I think like that's a terrifying thing, because A, it means that we actually have to have that much work done, and B, which, you know, isn't always the case in households. But then B, to be able to say, okay, you take it and go, like, with a pen, just cut stuff out that doesn't need to be in here. Like, that terrifies me.
I'm getting stressed thinking about it.
But that's the level, like, anyways, I think that's an extreme, like, and I don't want to say extreme as in you shouldn't do it. I think that would be a radical thing to do.
Yes.
And I actually think it'd be really healthy to do. I think the challenge becomes, how do you incorporate things like that slowly? Like, that would be an all-out, all-in kind of life-changing thing. And maybe somebody out there decides to do that. Fantastic. I think probably the first step or earlier steps are even like within your marriage and household.
Yeah.
Maybe even about certain purchases to say, hey, you know, help us make these decisions. And this is the last thing I'll say. The main thing is, I think we will always struggle if we are the ones to define for ourselves what is enough. You have to let somebody else critique your enough.
And I think that's one of the things, as you were talking, I started thinking about like how we function as a church in this way. Like, there's lots of freedom and flexibility within our, you know, annual budget. But at the end of the day, that the budget is still a community effort in many ways, right? We get volunteer committees that are submitting budgets, and then we vote on the budget when we have our annual general meeting. And there's a time for questions, and sometimes those questions are pointed questions about why we're spending money on X, Y, or Z. And it's like, sometimes it's uncomfortable. And sometimes it's you know, it can feel a little bit intrusive. Like, no, I budgeted that for my ministry, and I want that for my ministry, you know? You know, like, churches are not immune from these conversations as well. And I think that it would be easy to look at, a church of our size and type as being pretty modest. And in many ways we are, right?
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that we are not susceptible, right?
Yeah. I think the other thing that I've found encouraging over my years in ministry is that most often when somebody arises to point out issues with the budget, it's in the direction of being more generous.
Yeah.
Like
I've seen that.
When the hardest questions come up, it's often, why are we spending this amount of money on what looks like ourselves? And how can we be spending more money on mission and external resourcing and programs? Like, I think very often that's the discernment of a group of people is how do we be more generous?
Yeah. Actually, in recent years, I recall that there was one AGM we had where one of the questions was really about like, hey, why have we slashed our youth ministry budget? We should be pouring more into our youth.
Yeah.
And there was a very practical reason why the budget was different from one year to the next, but it was it was a valuable question to ask. Like why, so like that was helpful. That was good.
Yeah. Help us understand the heart behind the numbers.
Yeah.
And I think the more we can do that as individuals and as families, households, the better off we'll be as well.
Yeah.
So that's a daunting challenge though. Like it's a big change.
Yeah. So maybe like again, and the answer to the question what is enough is never going to be a hard and fast, like here's the 1 second or 1 minute summary of the answer. But I think that you've tapped into the heart behind it by saying like this is something that we can't answer for ourselves, that we're not going to be objective enough.
Yep.
But I think maybe like, and this can be a little bit more rapid fire, but like, what are some of the warning signs that we are veering into territory that could be described as too much? Maybe said another way, what are the warning signs that I am living more like the man in Jesus's parable? That you see that the kind of the posture of that man and say, am I mirroring that?
Yep. So I think one of the things that I find, and again, we didn't go down this in this direction on the sermon, is the fact that he is literally talking about destroying something that he has to replace it with something that is the same but bigger.
Yeah.
So that's for a church also, like that's a good. We don't need to go down this rabbit trail right now, but that's a good metric. Like, so are you buying? Or are you purchasing? Are you accumulating? Are you looking for things that are simply replacing things that you already have? Like, so I think that stupid bag analogy actually worked in this way.
Yeah.
Because it's a perfect example of the fact that I have a perfectly good backpack that carries the things I need for work, like a laptop and a water bottle and some books. I don't need a different style bag to do the same task. So that for me is a pretty good starting point to uncover what is a need versus a want.
Yeah.
You might want something and you might be able to justify it and rationalize the purchase, but is it a want or a need? So name things that are needs, and name things that are wants. That's a great thing. If you're trying to trick yourself into calling a want a need, that's a good indication.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So that's number one. Number two, I look at the amount of time I spend dwelling on something. So like this is I think in the realm of like attention and affection. So where your attention is, your affection follows. And so I need to think for myself about how much time. Now, I'm going to make good decisions if I'm going to make a decision. I want to make a good, wise decision.
So if you're making a big purchase, you want to research it and make sure you're making the most informed,
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
if I'm spending an inordinate amount of time on wants, that's also another red flag. So, for me for a while, like I was into photography and I worked as a photographer for 2 years while I was in school. So, I liked buying camera gear and taking good photos and chasing photos even, like kind of planning them out. But there came a time in our life where I needed to sit down and realize I've got a little bit too much money invested in these things. And we were selling our house at the time, and I sold all my gear. I sold it all. And the amount of mental energy that freed up in terms of like just like thinking about things that aren't needs was pretty cool to see. So yeah, look at how much time, where's my attention going? How much time am I spending dwelling on something and thinking about it? And if it's not a need, like if I'm spending too much time, like I said, on wants, that's a pretty good indicator. So that's number 2. And then number 3, I think you've got to have somebody in your life who you can run these things past and who will give you a very quick, again, rapid fire answer. Yes, pursue that. No, don't. Right? For me, that's my wife. Like I think for me, it has to be. So I know if I'm looking at a purchase and I say to her, hey, I'm considering this thing, and she says, yeah, you should look into it. That for me is a green flag. Like that's like green light, go for it.
Would you say Connie is more, would you say she is more apprehensive on spending? Like, because you could just go knowing that they're going to confirm your bias.
Yeah, I think so. I think she's also, I know that she'll say, no, that's stupid.
Yeah. Like Lindsay's the same way for me, right? And I think that we've worked toward understanding one another's habits and patterns over our almost 17 years of marriage. But still, I mean, I think regardless, it is an ongoing conversation and sometimes an ongoing tension to sort of understand one another and how you approach purchasing and money and wants and needs.
Yeah. So I think too, the other thing is that you need that person in your life to be able to say to you, not only about like an acute purchase, but just in general, you're spending too much time thinking about these things.
Yeah.
So I think you could walk away from this and actually, in some ways, covet this whole conversation, like in a way that's unhealthy.
Right.
So you go, well, okay, I'm going to become the best spender, non-spender that I can be. Like you can actually idolize this whole process.
Like you can turn into like a minimalist and it actually like wreck your life.
Well, this is the thing. I think it can become, I think minimalism is good. I think there's like a cult of minimalism that idealizes the lack of stuff as really ultimately the same thing. Right? So you need somebody who can say, you're still prioritizing the wrong thing. Whether it's to excess or to little, like, or to, So I think that those are the 3 things that I like, just at least off the top of my head, want to look for. I think if I were to add a 4th in there and you want to get a little bit gutsy, print off all of your bank statements for 3 months and actually go through and look at what you're spending your money on. And I think that's going to reveal too where things are going. There are subscriptions that you can buy now whose entire purpose is to cancel you from your subscriptions. Like you can literally pay a monthly fee so that an app goes through your banking and your email and unsubscribes you from paid subscriptions that you're not using.
And it's ostensibly saving you money, but you're spending money to save that money of things that you should just remember to cancel anyway.
Mind-blowing to me how we've created this environment where like we don't even know what we're spending. So those are 4. And if if you were to try even one of those 4, I think you're going to find health on the other side. There might be some conflict along the way. But you're going to find some health on the other side of it, and it's going to start to reveal where your heart is. And then, okay, last thing that I want to say, because I want to get this out, I think that ultimately, follower of Jesus, you need to have a proper, true, good, right understanding of where you are. Like you need to understand where you are accurately. And then you need to commit that to Jesus and actually take that to a place of prayer and say and allow God to convict you on it, right? Allow, present it to God and say, is this what you have for me? Is this right? Am I in line with your kingdom and what you're doing? And is this, and I think, again, like I said, the last thing now, probably too many times, if you're not willing to do that, that right there is your answer. anything that you're not willing to say, here's what I'm struggling with, God. Like that's the thing.
Yeah.
That is the thing.
Yeah.
And so it's not to say that you're not going to struggle. It's not to say that you're not going to have things that you're working through and that are hard, and progress is not linear. You're going to go up, you're going to go down. But as soon as you become unwilling to actually even say to God, who knows the thing already, God, this is the thing. I think that, again, that's your answer of where you're at. So again, not to shame and not to guilt. That's not what Jesus is doing. But I think what I would say is that the more I have found more freedom and less anxiety in committing finances to God together with my wife and in community than I have found in what would be, quote, having more than enough.
Yeah. That's a great way to look at it. And I think it encompasses, because one of the questions I have that we didn't really get to, but I think it kind of answers it there, is when we look at needs versus wants, and obviously wants are arguably outside of the barrier of enough, right? They are beyond enough, right? But I mean, so everyone has hobbies and things they like to spend money on and things like that, right? But I think that when we can ask that question of just saying, am I able to open-handedly submit this to God?
Yeah.
That sort of solves it for me, not that it's going to be an ongoing tension for the rest of our lives, but it solves the answer of how do I approach my wants and my hobbies and things like that, right? So that's helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Like God's desire is for you to experience an abundant life. We just need to let God define what abundance looks like, right? What life to the full actually means.
Yeah.
It's going to include some things that you don't, yes, technically by the letter of the law need to survive. But man, what those things contribute in terms of life and flourishing of life for you and those around you is warrant enough for the thing. So again, just allow other people and allow God to be the one to define those things.
Yeah.
And you're already going to be light years ahead of where you were.
That's good. Well, why don't we close out there? And until next time, we hope you have a great week. And we hope that this passage and this conversation is encouraging you to have conversations with loved ones and friends and family as we wrestle out how best to do this. Have a great week.